Millionaire disguises himself as a guest in his own hotel and meets the love of his life. The humid Miami heat was almost stifling that night. The salty scent of the ocean mixed with the sweet perfume of tropical flowers and the faint smell of smoke coming from the kitchens of South Beach's trendy restaurants. In the back seat of a black cab, Lucas Mitchell watched the city go by out the window. The vibrant lights reflected on his face, but his thoughts were far away. The air conditioning blew a cold, artificial wind, but not enough to ease the restlessness burning inside him. He wasn't there to enjoy the luxury of his own hotel chain. Not this time. In recent days, gossip sites and travel forums had been blasting the Blue Haven Hotel. Customers were reporting problems with the maintenance of the common areas, complaints about poor service, and even stories of VIP guests who felt ignored. Lucas knew the competition. All it took was one negative buzz to tarnish the reputation of a luxury hotel. And worse, the reports didn't come from one or two dissatisfied customers. There was a pattern. The hotel's top management, however, guaranteed that everything was under control. But Lucas didn't trust corporate reports. He wanted to see for himself. So that night, he wasn't the billionaire CEO. That night, he was just Luke Harris, an ordinary guest, trying to find out the truth. "This is it, sir," said the driver, pulling up in front of the Blue Haven Hotel, the flagship of the Mitchell chain. Luke looked up at the imposing facade. The glass and steel building reflected the moon over the Atlantic Ocean, creating a spectacle of light and shadow. The red carpet stretched all the way to the revolving doors, where a doorman in a white suit ushered in guests dressed in designer clothes, their leather suitcases being carried discreetly by porters. Luxury, sophistication, prestige. But behind those marble walls and crystal chandeliers were things really so perfect. Lucas paid the driver, picked up his simple suitcase, very different from the ones he usually carried on his trips, and entered the lobby. The distinctive smell of the hotel immediately enveloped him, a subtle blend of vanilla and jasmine, created exclusively for Blue Haven. The ambient piano music echoed softly. Businessmen discussed numbers on velvet sofas, couples toasted with champagne, and the clinking of glasses and conversations in different languages filled the space with a cosmopolitan air. Everything seemed perfect at first glance, but Lucas knew that when it came to an empire, problems were rarely visible on the surface. He walked up to the reception desk. "Good evening, sir. Name of reservation?" asked the attendant, flashing a professional smile. "Luke Harris." She typed it into the system and slid a magnetic card over the counter. "Here's your key, 5th floor, suite 512. If you need anything, just call reception." Lucas took the key and turned towards the elevators, but before he could take a step, an altered voice cut through the air, breaking the artificial harmony of the environment. "This is absurd. I demand to speak to the manager." He stopped instinctively. A few people around also looked in the direction of the commotion. In the center of the confusion, a man in a navy blue suit was pointing his finger at a young chambermaid. "Do you think you can steal from me and get away with it? My Rolex went missing right after you came into my room." Lucas frowned. The girl, visibly frightened, tried to keep her composure. "Sir, I didn't touch anything apart from the sheets and towels. We can check the security cameras." The guest snorted, crossing his arms. "Of course, because the cameras are really going to show you stuffing your watch in your pocket, aren't they? I want that thief searched now." The word thief made something inside Lucas turn around. He'd seen it happen before. Powerful people blaming the weakest to mask their own incompetence or carelessness. But he kept quiet. He couldn't expose himself. Fortunately, before the situation got any worse, the hotel manager showed up. "What's the problem here?" he asked in an authoritative voice. The guest turned to him, still furious. "The problem is that this girl came into my room and now my watch is gone. And I'm not an idiot." The manager glared at the chambermaid. "Haley, did you take the gentleman's watch?" She glared at him indignantly. "Of course not." The manager nodded. "Then let's settle this the right way. Sir, we can check the cameras and, if the watch isn't found, we'll launch a formal investigation." The guest grumbled but agreed. Lucas watched as Haley ducked her head and disappeared down the staff corridors. Something about that scene bothered him more than it should have. He went up to his room, but the image of the unjustly accused chambermaid continued to linger in his mind. The next morning, Lucas woke up early and went down to breakfast. The hall was packed. Foreign tourists were chatting animatedly, couples were leafing through tourist guides, and businessmen were typing frantically on their laptops. He wasn't there to enjoy Blue Haven's impeccable service. He wanted to understand the workings of the hotel through the eyes of an ordinary guest. After breakfast, he went back to his room. Shortly afterwards, he heard soft knocks on the door. When he opened it, he saw Haley Carter holding a cleaning trolley. For a moment, he just watched her. Without the frightened look of the night before, she looked different. Strong, but carrying a discreet sadness. "Good morning, sir. Can I tidy my room?" "Of course, sir." She entered and began her work, changing the sheets and organizing the towels. Lucas leaned against the wall watching her. "Last night, I saw what happened in the lobby. Was the problem solved?" Haley paused for a moment, then went back to straightening the sheets. "Yes." The guest found the watch in his own suitcase pocket. Lucas shook his head, laughing humorlessly. And did he at least apologize? She let out a sigh. Of course he didn't. People like him never apologize. Lucas felt a strange tightness in his chest. Perhaps investigating his own hotel was more complex than he had imagined, and maybe Haley Carter was an even bigger mystery. Lucas watched as Haley finished tidying her room. Her every move was precise, calculated, as if she was used to performing this routine automatically. But behind the trained gestures, there was something about her that intrigued him. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, studying her, while he thought of the best way to ask her a few questions without arousing suspicion. "So, what's it like working here?" he asked casually. Haley smoothed out the bedspread without looking up at him. "It's a job." The vague answer didn't surprise him, but he didn't give up. "I imagine Blue Haven is a very well-run place, right?" She paused for a second, as if pondering the question, but then went back to folding the towels. Most guests enjoy the experience. The choice of words didn't go unnoticed by Lucas. "But what about you? Do you like working here?" This time she raised her eyes to him, analyzing him. "As I said, it's a job." She definitely wasn't the type to open up easily. He noticed a slight hardening in her expression, as if she was used to prying questions and had learned to protect herself from them. It only made him want to know more. She was reserved, careful, and in a way, that made her even more intriguing. But he realized that if he insisted too much, she might start to get suspicious, so he changed the subject. "You must see everything here, right?" She smiled slightly but didn't answer. She just picked up the cleaning trolley and headed for the door. "Have a nice day, sir," and left. Lucas stood still for a few seconds, staring at the closed door. Haley Carter was definitely not like the other people who worked for him, and that made him even more curious. The day passed slowly. Lucas spent part of the afternoon observing the movement in the hotel, trying to pick up on small signs that might confirm the rumors he had read on the gossip sites. He noticed guests complaining about the waiting time for room service, a light bulb flickering in the hallway on the 5th floor, a waiter who seemed overworked during lunch. Small details, but enough to raise doubts about the hotel's management. It made him uneasy. He asked the management about the hotel and everyone said that everything was perfectly fine, and what was on the internet was just intrigue from the competition. He was suspicious and needed to find out what was going on behind the scenes, but for now he needed some fresh air. In the late afternoon, he decided to walk along the Miami Beach promenade. The smell of the ocean mingled with the warmth of the asphalt, freshly soaked by the humid breeze. But then he saw something that made him stop in mid-stride. "Haley, before continuing, please like the video and subscribe to support the channel. No uniform. And with several dogs around." She looked beautiful. She was wearing jeans and a light sweatshirt, and her hair was tied up in a messy way. She looked like a completely different person. Intrigued, he approached her. Maid by day, dog walker in the afternoon? Haley looked at him in surprise. "And a waitress at weekends." Lucas arched an eyebrow. "You work a lot?" She gave a small smile without stopping walking. "I have to. I want to pay for college." Lucas felt something inside him stir. Haley Carter wasn't just a hotel employee. She was fighting for something bigger, and that made him want to get to know her even more. She seemed about to say goodbye, so he kept walking beside her. "What college?" She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hotel management." Lucas felt a twinge of surprise. "Really?" She nodded. "I like the idea of offering people incredible experiences. My dream is to one day manage a hotel, a place where guests really feel special." He noticed a different sparkle in her eyes as she talked about it, a sparkle he hadn't seen for a long time. "Sounds like a great dream." Haley laughed lightly, slowing her pace. "It is, but sometimes it seems unattainable. Working 3 jobs, studying at night, paying the bills. Sometimes I wonder if it's worth it." Lucas was silent for a moment. He knew that feeling. Not of having to fight for money, but of wondering if everything he did had any real purpose. "It's worth it," he said, not realizing that his voice came out softer than he had intended. Haley looked at him, and for the first time, their eyes met for more than a few seconds, but then one of the dogs barked and pulled hard on the lead, causing Haley to stumble. Lucas reflexively grabbed her arm before she fell. She laughed, straightening up. "I think I need a raise as a dog walker. Or maybe just one job would be enough," Lucas muttered, but soon regretted it. Haley narrowed her eyes at him, crossing her arms. "You sound like someone who has never had to worry about money in her life." Lucas held her gaze. "What if I didn't?" Haley let out a short laugh, pulling out the tabs again. "Then I'd say the world is unfair." Lucas wanted to ask more, but he felt that anything he said at that moment might push her away. She was closed off, and he didn't want her to suspect anything. "I like to walk around here in the late afternoon." "Do you always do that?" he asked, changing the subject. Haley gave him a suspicious look. "Why?" "Just curious." She hesitated for a moment, but eventually answered, "Yes. The walk helps me forget a little about the day's fatigue." Lucas nodded, absorbing the information. "Can I walk with you tomorrow?" Haley looked surprised. "Do you want to help me with the dogs?" "Why not?" She looked at him for a moment, as if trying to decipher his intentions. "Fine, but I'll warn you right away. They're restless." Lucas smiled. "I think I can handle it." She shrugged and started to walk away. "We'll see tomorrow then, Luke." He watched as she walked away, her light sweatshirt swaying in the sea breeze. And for the first time since arriving at the hotel, he felt something different, something that had nothing to do with his investigation. That night, Lucas didn't sleep as well as he had hoped. Haley's face was still on his mind, her smile, her determined look, and the feeling that without even realizing it, he was already getting more involved than he should have been. The next day, he spent part of the morning observing the hotel staff. He noticed little details that confirmed some of the rumors he had read on the gossip sites. One guest complained that the hot water in the shower didn't work properly. Another mentioned that room service took longer than usual. Nothing scandalous, but they were small faults that for a luxury hotel could spell disaster. The problem was, why wasn't the management sorting it out? He waited for Haley to enter his apartment to clean up, but this time it wasn't her. Another maid entered the room, and he wondered why he wanted to see her again. Something was changing inside him. He made a mental note of his observations and decided that he would ask her some questions later. But at that moment, there was something else he wanted to do. When late afternoon arrived, he went down to the promenade again, and there was Haley. She was already with the dogs, but this time when she saw him, she really smiled. "I thought you were going to give up. I'm a man of my word. Oh, and why didn't you come to my apartment today?" "I had to take the day off to register for college." She handed him some forms. "So let's see if you can handle it." Lucas took the guides and started walking alongside her. For the first few minutes, the silence between them was comfortable, just the sound of the sea, the laughter of tourists, and the warm wind blowing past them. "You didn't tell me where you came from, Luke." He hadn't expected that question so soon. "New York." Haley frowned. "And why did you come to Miami?" Luke hesitated for a moment. He needed a change of scenery. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Haley seemed to accept the answer and looked ahead again. The warm Miami beach wind swayed Haley's loose hair as she walked alongside Lucas, trying to ignore the strange feeling of comfort that his presence was beginning to bring. He was a guest, a stranger, someone who, in theory, shouldn't matter to her. But then something happened. A tall, elegant woman was coming from the opposite direction. She was wearing a tight white dress, which highlighted her curves, and delicate-heeled sandals. Her sunglasses hid part of her face, but the smile on her perfectly red lips was recognizable from a distance. Lucas stiffened at the sight of her. "Luke?" Her voice was velvety and confident, and Haley felt a strange shiver as she noticed the familiarity with which she called him. Lucas forced a polite smile. "Madison." "Hi." Haley didn't like the way that woman looked at him. As if he were something she owned, a valuable asset that for some reason she had lost, but still had the right to value. Madison took off her sunglasses and tilted her head, looking at the dogs. "That's new. The great Lucas Mitchell walking dogs?" Lucas laughed, but there was something forced in his expression. "There are new things in my life, yes." Haley felt completely out of place in the conversation. The way Madison touched Lucas's arm as she spoke, the tone of her voice, everything about it seemed to scream that there was something between the two of them. She felt something in her chest, an unexpected discomfort. And then she did what any sensible person would do. She left the scene. "I'm going to keep walking. See you later, Luke." She turned and started walking, pulling the dogs along, pretending not to care. Luke glanced at Madison briefly and took a step back, clearly uncomfortable. "It was good to see you, Madison, but I have to go." Her eyes sparkled with curiosity. "Do you have to go after her?" Lucas just gave her a wry smile. "I'll see you around." And then he went after Haley. Lucas picked up the pace until he caught up with her. "Hey, you left me there alone with the beast." Haley smiled in a corner, still not looking at him. She seemed quite tame. Lucas laughed. "Only on the outside." She finally faced him, without slowing down. "Who was she?" He shrugged. "Madison, my ex." Haley felt something strange in her chest when she heard that. "Ah, so you have good taste." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean you have good taste?" She gave him a teasing look. "She's beautiful, like a magazine model." Lucas laughed. "Yes, she is." Haley didn't know why that bothered her. But then he continued. "But beauty isn't everything." Haley frowned. "Isn't it?" "No." Lucas sighed. "She only cares about parties, shopping, and alcohol. She has no real interest in anything other than her own image. I broke up because I wanted to find someone better for my life." He looked at Haley in a different way, a way that made his stomach turn. For a second, time seemed to slow down. She felt his gaze weigh on her in a way she had never felt before. But before she could react, a loud bark brought her back to reality. One of the dogs pulled hard, and the lead slipped out of her hand. "Max!" Haley exclaimed. The dog ran off down the beach, heading straight for another dog, a white female who was sitting on the sand with her owner. Haley ran after him, and Lucas didn't hesitate to follow. The hot sand sank beneath their feet as they ran. Max ran up to the puppy, sniffing her as if he had just found his canine soulmate. Lucas and Haley finally caught up with him and stopped, panting and laughing. Lucas held Max by the collar, smiling. "I think he's looking for someone in his life too." Haley laughed, smoothing her wind-blown hair. Lucas was still looking at her. And in that moment, he knew. He wanted to know more about Haley, even if she didn't know it yet. The warm Miami Beach breeze blew gently as Lucas and Haley walked back down the sidewalk side by side. The sun was beginning to set, tinting the sky with golden and orange hues, reflecting off the ocean that stretched out in the distance. Their steps were slow, as if, somehow, neither of them wanted the moment to end so soon. Lucas looked at her sidelong, feeling something grow inside him with every second he spent next to her. She was different. He couldn't explain exactly how, but he knew he had never met anyone like Haley. She held the dog's leads with ease now, the episode from before seeming to have dissipated with the sea breeze. But Lucas still felt the energy of that exchange of glances. She had felt it too, hadn't she? As much as he wanted to prolong the walk, he knew that their time together was running out. Haley sighed and looked at the watch on her wrist. "I've got to go." Lucas felt a pang of disappointment. "Already?" She smiled slightly. "Yes. Today is my first day at college. I can't be late. The news took Lucas by surprise. Really? This is your first day? Hayley nodded, her eyes twinkling slightly. Yes, it was a long process to get enrolled. But I'm finally starting. Lucas smiled, feeling genuinely happy for her. This is incredible, Hayley, it really is. She shrugged, as if she didn't want to make a big deal out of it, but Lucas could see the glint of pride hidden in her eyes. He wanted to tell her to stay a little longer. He wanted to say that he wasn't ready to let her go yet. But instead, he just nodded. Then go and kick ass. Hayley laughed and shook her head. Thanks, Luke. See you tomorrow. She turned and started walking away, and Luke stood there watching her disappear down the avenue. And it was at that moment that he realized. He wanted more time with her. He wanted to see her smile. He wanted to hear her talk about her dreams, about her life. He wanted to know everything about her. And maybe that was a problem. The next morning, Lucas was sitting on the sofa in his bedroom when he heard soft knocks on the door. He smiled before he even got up. It was her. He opened the door and found Hayley standing there, with her impeccable uniform and cleaning trolley by her side. Good morning, sir. May I come in to clean? Lucas leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms and giving her an amused look. I put everything I needed here in the bedroom, so that when you arrived we could talk instead of you having to clean. Hayley blinked in surprise. What? Lucas smiled. Come in. I want to show you something. She hesitated for a moment, but then went inside and left the trolley outside. Lucas walked over to the table and picked up a wrapped package. After you left yesterday, I went to the mall and bought a very good book for people who want to work in hospitality. He held out the package to her. Sit down and have a look. Let's talk. Hayley looked at him for a moment, too surprised to react. She took the package carefully and tore the paper slowly. When she saw the title of the book, her eyes went wide. This book? She ran her fingers over the cover in disbelief. I'd heard of it. It's one of the best for those who want to learn about hotel management. Lucas nodded. I wondered. I thought it might be useful for you. She bit her lip, holding the book as if it was something valuable. I wanted to buy it, but... She didn't finish the sentence. But Lucas understood. She couldn't spend money on it. The silence between them stretched on for a moment, until Hayley took a deep breath and looked at him. Thank you, Luke. I really mean it. Lucas smiled. It was nothing. But for Hayley, it was everything. She looked down at the book again, and without realizing it, her eyes began to water. And then, as if she had been transported to another time, her mind took her back to her childhood. She had never had anyone treat her like that. She'd never had anyone do anything special for her. From an early age, Hayley learned to survive on her own. Her parents were never affectionate. They never asked how she was or how she felt. They lived in their own world and were often drunk, laughing or fighting. Love was something distant, like a story in a book that she read but never lived. She grew up feeling invisible, as if she was never good enough, as if she was never worthy of being cared for. So, over the years, she learned not to expect anything from anyone. But there was Lucas. And he did something for her without expecting anything in return. She blinked a few times, trying to contain her emotion, but a silent tear ran down her cheek. Lucas frowned, worried. Hayley? She quickly wiped the tear away and smiled. I'm so sorry. It's just... She hesitated, looking at the book. It's the first time anyone's bought anything for me. Lucas remained motionless. His chest tightened when he heard that. What? Hayley smiled in a small way, trying to lessen the impact. I've never had a present before. Lucas felt something inside him break, and at that moment he knew that he would do anything to see Hayley happy. But before he could say anything, she stood up hastily. I've been here long enough. I need to get back to work. She carefully picked up the book and turned towards the door. Lucas wanted to say something. He wanted to tell her to stay. He wanted her to know that he really cared. But he knew she wasn't ready to believe that yet. So he just watched her leave. But before she got through the door, he said, I'll see you later with the dogs. Hayley looked at him over her shoulder, and then, for the first time since she'd met him, she smiled genuinely. "See you later." And she left. Lucas stood there, feeling something grow inside him. He wanted to see her again. He needed to see her again. And maybe he was beginning to realize that his time in Miami was no longer about the hotel. It was about her. And, try as he might, he knew he was already in too deep. The warm Miami beach breeze was blowing gently when Lucas reached the promenade. The sky was already starting to turn golden and orange, reflecting off the calm ocean. The sound of the waves mingled with the laughter of the tourists and the clinking of glasses in the seaside bars. It was a perfect setting, but Lucas paid no attention to any of it. His gaze was fixed on her. Haley was walking towards him with the dogs, the loose strands of her hair dancing in the wind. And Lucas found himself smiling before he even realized it. Something about her made him feel a kind of peace he didn't know he needed. She stopped next to him and smiled slightly. "I thought you were going to give up being a dog walker." Lucas laughed. "And miss my chance to walk with the most interesting person I've met in Miami?" "No way." Haley rolled her eyes, but he could see that she was fighting back a smile. The two of them started walking together, as if it was something natural, something they had always done. Lucas looked at her and asked, genuinely interested, "So, now tell me, how was your first day at college yesterday?" Haley sighed, a proud smile appearing on her lips. "It was amazing. I felt like I'm finally on the right track. It was just an introductory class, but it made me realize that this is what I want for my life." Lucas felt a strange satisfaction at seeing her excited. "I knew you'd rock it." She looked at him sideways, curious. "Why do you say that with such certainty?" He shrugged, but his gaze was intense. "Because you have something different, a strength that you don't even realize you have. And people like that always get where they want to go." Haley looked away, as if she didn't know how to deal with that kind of compliment, as if she'd never heard anything like it before. The silence between them was comfortable for a while, just the sound of the sea and the footsteps of the dogs accompanying them. Then Lucas remembered why he was there, his investigation into the hotel. "Haley, can I ask you something?" She nodded. "You've been working at the Blue Haven for a long time, haven't you? How do you see things there?" She hesitated for a moment. "Why do you want to know?" "I've noticed a few complaints. Small things, but they could explain why some guests were dissatisfied." Haley let out a humorless laugh. "Little things? You have no idea." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "Then tell me." Haley sighed, as if pondering whether or not to open up. But then something inside her seemed to give up. "My boss hardly ever shows up for work." Lucas frowned. "What do you mean?" Haley looked at him seriously. "She arrives in the morning, has coffee in the hotel restaurant with the director, and then disappears." Lucas felt a knot forming in his stomach. "The director?" Haley nodded. "They're having an affair. Everyone knows. But no one can say anything because he protects her. Meanwhile, I'm overworked, cleaning 20 apartments a day or more, and I still have to answer all the sector's questions since my boss is never available." Lucas clenched his fists. Now it all made sense. The complaints, the failures. Why the director always said that it was all just intrigue on the part of the competition. He didn't want anyone to investigate because he himself was part of the problem. Lucas took a deep breath, controlling his irritation. Haley didn't realize it, but she had just given him the key to understanding what was going on inside Blue Haven. But at that moment, looking at her, he realized that the story went beyond the hotel. She was suffering, overloaded, exploited. And yet she stood firm. Lucas looked at her with admiration. "That's not fair, Haley." She shrugged. I know, but I need this job, more than ever." Lucas hated hearing that. He hated knowing that out of necessity, she had to accept that situation. He hated realizing that she was used to having no one to defend her. And at that moment, he made a silent decision. Haley would no longer be alone in this. As the walk drew to a close, they both stopped at the edge of the promenade. The sun had completely disappeared, and the lights of Miami shone in the distance, reflected in the dark water of the ocean. Lucas looked at Haley. "Can I ask you something?" She raised an eyebrow, suspicious. "What?" "A hug." Haley laughed, crossing her arms. A hug? For what? Lucas smiled. Because you're amazing in my life, and because I think God brought us together for a purpose. And we're about to find out what that is. Haley sat still for a moment. If someone had told her a few days ago that a hotel guest would mess with her life so much, she would have laughed. But there he was, saying words that no one had ever said to her. Something inside her softened. Then slowly she moved closer and hugged him. Lucas closed his eyes for a second, feeling her warmth against him. And he knew at that moment that there was no turning back. She pulled away slowly, and he held her hand before she pulled away completely. Haley looked at him, surprised by the unexpected touch. "Lucas, what do you do for a living?" Lucas smiled. "I'll tell you soon. The day you agree to go out with me for dinner." She winked, catching herself smiling. "And if I never say yes? Then I'll be waiting." Haley bit her lip as if pondering, and then she said, almost without thinking, "Saturday." Lucas's smile widened. "Saturday?" She nodded. "I don't have an evening class and I only work as a waitress until 3 in the afternoon." Lucas squeezed her hand lightly. "I'm already looking forward to it." Haley laughed and looked away, embarrassed. Without thinking, Lucas brought her hand to his lips and placed a soft kiss on her skin. She was paralyzed. Her heart raced. Lucas smiled when he saw the blush on her cheeks. "See you Saturday, Haley. But I'll see you tomorrow at the hotel, okay?" She smiled back. "See you tomorrow, then." And then she turned and walked away. Lucas stood there, watching her go, his heart racing. He knew that something had changed. He knew that this woman would change his life forever. What he didn't know was that fate had even bigger plans for the two of them, and that Saturday would bring revelations that neither of them was prepared to face. The day dawned warm in Miami, and the sun was already shining brightly when Lucas went down to the breakfast restaurant. This time he was in disguise. He wore a dark cap and sunglasses to avoid being recognized, a simple but effective trick. He didn't want anyone in the hotel to know that he was investigating behind the scenes of his own empire. He sat at a strategic table, from where he could observe everything without being noticed, and it wasn't long before he saw them. The hotel director and the head of housekeeping were sitting at a table further away, laughing intimately, like a couple who didn't bother to hide anything. The discreet touches, the complicit glances, there was no doubt about it. Haley wasn't wrong. Lucas watched the two of them calmly finish their coffee, without any hurry, as if they had no responsibilities there. Then they got up and left the restaurant together. He waited a few minutes and discreetly made his way to the hotel's side exit. From a distance, he saw the director open the car door for the housekeeper. They got into the vehicle and drove off together. Lucas picked up the phone and dialed the director's number. The man's voice answered on the other end of the line, full of false confidence. "Mr. Mitchell, how's your trip going? I hope you're enjoying it." Lucas clenched his jaw. "I'm fine. And the hotel?" The director laughed lightly. "Everything's under control. You can rest assured. I'm at the hotel now, monitoring everything closely." Lucas felt fury rise in his throat. He looked down the street and saw the director's car turning the corner, leaving the hotel. "Good," he replied, his voice laced with irony. "I'll talk to you later." He hung up without waiting for an answer. The blatant lie only reinforced that he was right to be suspicious. Blue Haven's administration was in the wrong hands, but now he had something much more important to deal with, Haley. He went back to his room and waited. He didn't want to see her cleaning that place. He didn't want to see her in that position. He wanted to see her in another way. When the light knock sounded on the door, he quickly opened it. Haley was standing there, holding the cleaning trolley, but the room was already spotless. She looked around, confused. "Wow, it's already clean?" Lucas smiled. "I've tidied up. This way we can talk more instead of you wasting time cleaning." She blinked a few times, clearly surprised. "You tidied up again?" "Yes." Lucas leaned against the wall and crossed his arms, looking at her with amusement. "I was looking forward to seeing you." Haley looked away and he noticed a small smile forming on her lips. "You sound like someone who can't wait for Saturday to arrive." Lucas took a step towards her. "Because I can't." For a moment, the silence between them was filled with something deeper, something that neither he nor she knew exactly how to define. Haley looked away, fiddling with the strap of her apron. My boss isn't in her office. I went there to solve a problem, and nothing. Lucas already knew the answer, but asked anyway. Oh no, where did she go? Haley let out a short laugh, shaking her head. With the director, as usual. Lucas kept his expression neutral. So you're really doing your job, and you're going to have to solve the problem that was hers? Haley sighed. More than that, actually. Lucas didn't want to see Haley in that situation, but he knew he couldn't just take her out of there without her wanting to. She walked over and reached into her pocket for her cell phone. I want to show you something. She sat on the edge of the bed and opened an app. Last night in college, we learned about how to use artificial intelligence to organize the sector's materials control. I made a simulation to present to my boss. I think it will help a lot. She turned the screen towards Lucas, and as she did so, her arm brushed his. Lucas felt her touch, felt her soft perfume, felt the warmth emanating from her skin. He wanted to kiss her. The desire was so strong and sudden that he had to clench his hands into fists to control himself. Haley continued to show him the system, unaware of his internal struggle. Or maybe she did and was ignoring it. Lucas was staring at her lips when suddenly his phone rang. He blinked, trying to process the sound that broke the moment. He picked up the handset and saw the name on the screen. Madison. Haley noticed and immediately moved away. Lucas answered quickly. I can't talk right now. Her ex's voice came from the other side, honeyed and insistent. Oh, Luke, come on. I want to see you. We need to talk. He sighed, irritated. Madison, I can't. I'll talk to you later. He hung up before she could insist. When he looked up, Haley was already on her feet, picking up her cleaning trolley. I have to go. I still have 19 rooms to clean. Lucas wanted to stop her. He wanted to tell her that that phone call meant nothing, but he knew it would be in vain. Haley didn't want to get involved in something that could hurt her. She left the room without looking back. Lucas stood still for a few seconds, feeling something he couldn't name. But he knew one thing. He needed to prove to Haley that Madison was no longer a part of his life. The afternoon arrived and they met on the promenade, just like the days before. But Haley was different. She smiled, but Lucas could see that it was a forced smile. He noticed the way she avoided looking at him for too long. She was uncomfortable because of the phone call. Lucas decided not to bring it up. He didn't want to spoil the evening with Madison's ghost. He acted normally, made jokes, told stories, and gradually saw Haley relax. The following days were a repetition of what had already become routine. In the morning, Lucas would go to the restaurant, always in disguise, and watch the director and the head of housekeeping have coffee and leave together, leaving the hotel to its own devices. In the afternoon, he would meet Haley for a walk with the dogs. Every day he felt her getting closer. Every day he knew he was falling more in love. On Friday night, Lucas could hardly sleep. Saturday was coming. And with it, a dinner that would change everything. He just didn't know how much yet. Before he could say anything else, Haley closed her eyes and leaned in, feeling her heart race in her chest. Lucas barely had time to process what was happening before he felt her lips touch his. Soft, hesitant, but charged with emotion. Time seemed to slow down. The sound of the waves breaking on the sand became distant. The lights of the city faded in his mind. All that existed was Haley. Lucas held her by the waist, pulling her closer as if he wanted to protect her from everything, as if that moment was too precious to let slip away. She fit perfectly in his arms, as if she had always belonged there. The kiss began gently, but then slowly deepened, as if they were both discovering something that had always been there, waiting to happen. It was the kind of kiss that carried silent promises, that spoke more than 1,000 words ever could. When their lips parted, Haley could still feel the warmth of his breath against her face. Her eyes were shining, reflecting the city lights in the background, and Lucas knew in that instant that there was no turning back. She smiled, her heart still racing, and whispered, I think you can buy the restaurant now. Lucas let out a hoarse laugh, still holding her close, as if he never wanted to let her go. I'll buy as many as you want. But To be honest, he ran his fingers over her face, brushing away a lock of hair that had fallen over her eyes. All I want is you. Hayley felt a shiver run across her skin. For the first time in her life, she felt chosen, truly chosen. Lucas hugged her tightly, closing his eyes for a moment, grateful for that moment, for that woman, for everything that was about to begin. Because he knew, at that moment, nothing else in the world mattered but her, and that was just the beginning of their story. So what did you think of this ending? Would you like to see what happens next, or is Lucas and Hayley's story already complete for you? Let us know in the comments if you'd like a sequel. If you like this story, leave a like and subscribe to our channel to support our work. This helps us to bring you more exciting stories. See you in the next video.